I've always been interested in biographies and the stories of people's lives. In 10th grade, I read over 30 books of the Kennedy family, not out of obsession, but deep fascination of their commitment to public service. I read so many biographies that I've lost count, and I must say, I get this from my mother. She's always reading biographies. I'm Allie Portee, a fashion journalist and editor of Zayla magazine. I invite you to sit in on some of my conversations with some pretty inspiring people from around the world on topics of fashion, entertainment, music, and entrepreneurship. Basically, these are conversations from the soulful side of life about topics that will hopefully inspire your life in some way. This is the soulful side of life. Colored wedding gowns? Danielle Frankel certainly thinks so. The American New York-based designer has a fresh and modern approach to wedding gowns, which are catching the attention of brides all over the world. Sitting down, she talks about her journey, what inspired her to come away from the traditional wedding gown look, cultures that inspired her collections, trends from the pandemic in bridal gowns, and her newest collection, and more. So enjoy this podcast, episode number 7, with Danielle Frankel. You're very talented with your wedding designs, and you're pushing the boundaries of bridal gowns where you're introducing color and not always doing the typical ivory. What inspired you to come away from the typical bridal gowns and do it how you're doing it?
So I think it's more of like a layered question that kind of leads to a layered response here. Because I went to Parsons, and then I had a job at Marquesa for a little bit, but then I went to Vera Wang. And I learned from the master, essentially. I think that in my education, I learned a lot about like the traditional ways of doing things or fashion or whatever, but something that all like throughout just my career that has really stuck, especially when I've seen a lot of young designers rise and all of that, the labels who are really successful and who I think emerge with a real voice for what they're doing are the ones that have the most impact and are able to grow their businesses. Because for me, I'm not reinventing the wheel of garments. I'm not providing you or my clients or anybody some like kind of visual, like, oh my God moment where this is stuff that they've never seen before. That's not the purpose of what I'm doing. What I'm trying to do is really dissect what it is that a modern bride wants. And there's a recipe within that. And within my collection show, I understand what that woman wants and kind of providing her with something specific. There are so many women getting married that do want that traditional look. And I think that product exists, for them and is appropriate for them. But what I'm trying to do is answer something for a woman who has in the past not like known really where to look for her wedding gown. And when I say recipe, it's like, women want a bustier, but they want an open back, and they want their arms covered, but they want it covered only in a certain way, or proportion a very specific way, or like a technique only a little bit here, but a lot of it here. It's like those kinds of things, and then designing within that. And I think that that's why we've been successful, is because we're answering to these women. I'm on the sales floor. I'm hearing what they're saying, and in that into my collection.
Gotcha. Yeah. I live in Lebanon, and I'm sure the Lebanese are very gifted in couture, and their wedding gowns are oftentimes another level than what a Western woman would wear. And when I visit their ateliers, they've got a Western section and then an Arab section. Have you ever designed for a Middle Eastern woman where they want all of that extra glam, and how do you, cater to them?
Yeah. We have, I don't want to say like a secret business, but we have quite a big business in Kuwait and Dubai, Saudi Arabia, but most of that business is custom. So these women pre-pandemic flew in from those places, and we would do or start from scratch and make the most magnificent garments for these women. I can't show you what they look like because they don't
want to
show
be
them
exposed
in their wedding photos, and it's very, very private. But it's this really beautiful experience where we get to make these really over the top, like really beautiful gowns. So there is that client, and then there's our American client or our French client or what have you. Actually, Australia is a huge market for us, where we're taking like, the everyday woman and kind of looking into what she wants.
Gotcha. Are you inspired by women from other countries when you're creating kind of, your own style within wedding gowns that you...
Yeah. Funny because I look at the collection as a whole and I kind of break it up. So some of it is, I know that this is for the Saudi client, and I know this is for the Australian girl, or this is the American girl. And I think for a successful collection, we have to be catering to all of these women, and sometimes show our clients things that might not work for them, just so that they can understand, like, this is why this wouldn't work for you, but here's this, which is, can translate better for you. But having that range is really important so that we can kind of hit our marks with all these women from different countries, also different price points. And, not everybody can afford, a certain price point. So we have to have this kind of range, and some things are a little bit more technical and so on.
Sure. What did you learn, or what did you take away from Vera Wang that helped you launch your own business?
Being in the fitting process with her was certainly the most valuable kind of education I've had. Coming from an editor's eyes, but she's truly the master. So to learn directly from her, I think just was it had a huge impact on me.
Yeah, and launching your own brand. What was it scary for you? Was it something that you were hesitant in doing, or you just did it?
So funny. I didn't even. This is like, it's gonna sound like I don't know. It's gonna sound strange, but I didn't really know that I was launching my own label. It kind of just happened naturally, because when I had left Vera, I started making custom gowns for like friends of friends, and like kind of word of mouth. It wasn't like I had any kind of business at all, or any kind of path. I didn't even know what I was doing. In fact, I was like interviewing for companies and kind of making these custom gowns on the side to see what would happen. And then I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to make a collection just from everything that I've heard from people. I feel like I have this thing that I need to get out into the world and see what happens. And then that thing ended up, gaining press and getting picked up by stores. And then all of a sudden I had a salesperson, and then all of a sudden I had a publicist. And so it just kind of rolled into this. But I think the path getting here was maybe not having a direction. And that gave me the freedom to have a voice and do something new, because I wasn't doing it with the intention of like getting it out into the world, if that makes sense.
Sure. Like you weren't a little girl thinking I'm going to create a business, and that was like always your life goal to get there. What advice do you have for anyone who's wanting to launch a fashion brand or a bridal brand, and either it's fear holding them back, or they just don't know where to start?
I think first, it's so funny because if I would know now before launching a business if I should do it or not, I would definitely ask myself again, are you sure you want to get into this? Because it takes a lot of discomfort, I think, on your end. And I mean, even Ian can even speak to this as a friend of mine who I talk to about all sorts of things, how like you have to sometimes be the person that you don't necessarily see in yourself. So whether that's the boss or the CEO, like I'm a designer, in no way was I trained in, running a company. So I think if I were to give anyone advice, it would be, are you ready to go out of your comfort zone in so many different ways that, are going to challenge you like you've never been challenged before? And I thought before doing this that I had been super challenged in design or whatever. But it really throws you curveballs, and it's sort of like, are you prepared to be that person?
Yeah, it's another level of work that you just don't envision when you're wrapped in a company, when you're protected.
And it's amazing, and the fulfillment it's being a parent to something else. And I say this because I'm a mom, so I understand like the comparison, like watching my baby grow up. This is another baby where like you are really kind of maturing with it. And it's cool.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
What trends are you seeing coming out of the pandemic for brides? I saw in a recent interview that you talked about how there's a lot of maybe courthouse marriages, so that affects wedding gowns. So how are you adapting to the trends coming out of the pandemic?
So it's interesting because we are still in the middle of the pandemic, right? But like, hopefully we're in the tunnel still, but maybe we're a little bit closer to the light. I think, hopefully.
Yeah.
So right now, because we design, so far in advance from when our clients are actually walking down the aisle, I am thinking quite a bit about the weddings after the pandemic. And I think that after the pandemic, it's going to be like a 1.5 year long span. I mean, I'm not a doctor. I don't know how long that'll be, but until we get to the normal weddings where they, how they were pre-pandemic, I think there's still quite a bit of time, but we're in an in-between phase where people have figured out how to manage around the pandemic. So weddings are no longer being postponed, which was happening before. They're happening, but just in a different way. So even if the wedding is a 15-person wedding, it is a wedding. And that's a trend that I'm seeing, that it's not so much like, let's run to the courthouse. Now we're seeing pandemic weddings that are very much so elevated weddings, even if they just have a smaller attendance.
Okay. So are hemlines shorter, or is beading and sequins less?
Anything goes. Honestly, what makes you feel the best and beautiful. I think people can take more risks because they're not feeling like this attachment to being traditional. So that detachment is helping them say like, oh, I always envisioned myself maybe looking like this, but I just want to feel beautiful and happy. I'm like very in the moment. So I think that mindset, kind of then translates to the gown, and the gown is something you're never going to compromise on, So shorter hemlines, sure. But I think it's about like the customer feeling the most beautiful. So the trends are more like psychological, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
The trend is feeling beautiful. And that's why I introduced color, because I don't think that this idea of ivory is going to be something that sticks. I think it's going to be whatever it is that feels bridal to you.
Yeah. Of what it's like when Sarah Jessica Parker wore a black gown, right, for her wedding. So she mentioned regretting that, but maybe it will become kind of a norm for future weddings.
And it's interesting. I don't know if it would be a black gown or whatever, but to me, we did a lot of ombre gowns. To me, it was like a transitional thing, like going from one color into the next, like kind of this phase out, phase in sort of situation.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. One second. You've talked about venturing into red carpet looks. Did the Oscars last night or the award season inspire you to really move in that direction, or how are you in that department?
The thing about like my business and a red carpet business is I think that it's always really fun to look at the red carpet and see what's going on in the red carpet world. And this is also something that like I've thought a lot about, but you know, our business at its core, we are a bridal label. So although I'm looking at it, I'm less thinking about like red carpet glamour and more thinking about reality glamour and like bridal, true fashion bridal and what that is. Because right now it's really one of the most important elements of evening wear because no one has galas or anything. Like, you know, what I'm really thinking about is the bride and the glamour associated with the bride.
Okay. But you are interested perhaps in venturing into evening wear and...
Yeah, definitely, interested. Of course, it's crossed my mind. I think, you know, the thing with bridal is that I've been able to bridal is in my core, but it's what makes me different. I love that I've had this impact that really resonates with my clients, you know, having like that moment where we bond because I feel like I'm answering something that they've been looking for. I love that feeling. And it's not that I'm just creating fashion, but I'm creating like a real emotional connection to another woman and what she wants. Like that's so important to me that I get to have those relationships. And I don't know if I would have the ability to do that if I had an evening wear collection that was at a traditional retailer hanging on a rack. There's something to me that like I get to sit and chat with my brides. We get to know each other and go through the process together. And I love that.
Yeah.
And it makes me a better designer too.
I'm sure you would get it when you're creating a custom look for the Oscars. Like with Regina King worked with Louis Vuitton for 3 months since January creating her look last night.
Yeah.
So I guess it depends. But okay, you have a new collection coming out next
We just came out with a new collection.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about that and what inspired it?
So this was the first collection that came out since October 2019, because when the pandemic hit, it was like 4 weeks before we were going to show a collection.
Wow.
And so we kind of just put that all on hold and, you know, whatever. So it was the first time since the pandemic that we launched, a huge amount of product with a real point of view. And it was by far our strongest collection, I think, because I sat for so long without creating something new that it allowed me to put the best work forward. Also having gone through the pandemic, those kinds of like moments, they do make you a little bit more, it made me a little bit smarter to sit for a minute and think versus feeling the pressure of making a collection and a collection and a collection. I essentially skipped 2 seasons. So I had all this time to think about, okay, really, what do I want to do next? And I think what happened was just a much stronger collection because of that time that I was sitting on.
Yeah. And how many looks are in the collection? And
I think it ended up being 20 looks. Okay. And some of them were in color and we translated them into ivory. It's very focused and edited, and there are groups that make sense together. It's very much so something that like I'm very happy and like very proud of this specific collection because I feel like it came after this huge hurdle that we faced, which was the pandemic and all of the issues that came along with that. So I was just so excited to get it out into the world.
I can imagine. Is it themed, or did you do a digital video behind it?
We did a lookbook shoot, and we'll send you the images. But it was with, so the two women that we shot it on were Grace Bowl and Christina Hughes, which they're iconic. They are like they're real women, you know. I'm not putting a 19-year-old in a wedding gown and she's the model, you know. These are real women, which I loved that. And we shot the collection with Stas Komarovsky, who I've been a fan of his work for a really long time. Andrew Mukumal, who I first met because we did Zoe Kravitz's rehearsal wedding dress together. He styled the collection. So it was like a real like collaborative effort with all the people that I worked with. And I was really excited about it. And, you know, as far as the design, it was very much so inspired by flowers and like the way they grow and then wilt. So we have a lot of wilting necklines is what I call it, or things that are kind of falling off as flowers die. You know, what that looks like. Yeah. But that was, you know, just as the aesthetics and not so much design direction, I would say.
Gotcha.
My design direction always has to do with the girl.
Gotcha. Okay, two lasting questions. What can we expect to see from you for the rest of this year or going into next? And then is there anything that you want to say about your brand or about the new collection or just about yourself?
Yeah, what you can expect to see from me this year is, I think, just more like thinking about reality and what the wedding really is and what that really means. So, you know, we're expanding into our pajamas and products like that. That's not necessarily just the gown, but what else are you thinking about within your wedding? And that's aside from, you know, expanding the range of the collection and, you know, providing more wedding gowns. But I do want to get into not just the gown, the other things that surround the wedding as well. I think that could be really interesting from us and what people probably want to see from us. Because right now we're so limited to only working with the bride. Yeah. But we have, you know, so much potential to reach so many more clients and people that want to, you know, have a little piece of the label and can't because they're not a bride. Like it's not fair to limit that. So I think we definitely want to start thinking about that. And as far as the label, I think I just want to keep growing at this kind of like small and steady pace. I think that's really worked for us. You know, we're not a label that's like flashy in your light and like in every single article, or you're not seeing us as like the it kid, you know. Right now, like we are this small and steady and growing, like, I kind of, you know, Danielle Frankel, we have a very like culty following, and I kind of love that because I feel like it's small and it's growing and it's, you know, it's month by month and like inch by inch for us, and I like that we are still like kind of in this infancy stage and like there's so much room to grow and almost like not knowing exactly what the future is going to bring, but also like having these goals that I think we've set forth. We did grow by 40% during the pandemic. So I think that says a lot about our trajectory and where our potential is.
Yeah, that's amazing, because you would think that growth would be stunted. That's amazing. So
yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
I appreciate your time.
Of course, and I wish you the best. I hope that you enjoyed this podcast episode and that you have found a soulful connection to the conversation. God bless you, and until the next episode, go bless somebody else.